Hey guys, and welcome back to Storytime with Sarah. We are continuing our Sideways Stories from Wayside School series today. Still in the first book, and today we're going to be reading chapters 5 and 6. So if you missed the last two videos, you're going to want to go back and watch those first so that you can get to know our characters and know where we're at in the story. If you're already ready to go and you've seen the other videos and you can't wait to hear what happens in Mrs. Jewell's class next, then go grab a friend and come cuddle up because it's Storytime with Sarah. Chapter 5, Todd. All of the children in Mrs. Jewell's class, except Todd, were talking and carrying on. Todd was thinking. Todd always thought before he spoke. When he got an idea, his eyes lit up. Todd finished thinking and began to speak, but before he said two words, Mrs. Jewell called him. "Todd," she said, "you'd know better than to talk in class. You must learn to work quietly, like the other children." She wrote his name on the blackboard under the word discipline. Todd looked around in amazement. All of the other children who had been talking and screaming and fighting only seconds earlier were quietly working in their workbooks. Todd scratched his head. A child was given 3 chances in Mrs. Jewell's class. The first time he did something wrong, Mrs. Jewell wrote his name on the blackboard under the word discipline. The second time he did something wrong, she put a check next to his name. And the third time he did something wrong, she circled his name. Todd reached into his desk and pulled out his workbook. He had only just started on it when he felt someone tap him on the shoulder. It was Joy. "What page are you on?" Joy asked. "Page 4, Todd whispered. "I'm on page 11, said Joy. Todd didn't say anything. He didn't want to get into trouble. He just went back to work. 5 minutes later, Joy tapped him again. Todd ignored her, so Joy poked him in the back with her pencil. Todd pretended that he didn't notice. Joy got up from her seat and sharpened her pencil. When she came back, she poked it into Todd's back. "What page are you on?" she asked. "Page 5, Todd answered. "Boy, are you dumb," said Joy. "I'm on page 29. "It isn't a race," Todd whispered. 5 minutes later, Joy pulled Todd's hair and didn't let go until he turned around. "What page are you on?" she demanded. "Page 6, Todd answered as quietly as he could. "I'm on page 200, Joy shouted. Todd was very angry. "Will you please let me do my work and stop bothering me?" Mrs. Jewell heard him. "Todd, what did I say about talking in class?" Todd scratched his head. Mrs. Jewell put a check next to Todd's name on the blackboard under the word discipline. Todd really tried to be good. He knew that if he talked one more time, Mrs. Jewell would circle his name. Then he'd have to go home early at 12 o'clock on the kindergarten bus, just as he had the day before and the day before that. In fact, there hadn't been a day since Mrs. Jewell took over the class that she did not send Todd home early. She said she did it for his own good. The other children went home at 2 o'clock. Todd wasn't really bad. He just always got caught. He really wanted to stay past 12 o'clock. He wanted to find out what the class did from 12 to 2. But it didn't look as though this was going to be his day. It was only 10:30 and he already had 2 strikes against him. He sealed his lips and went back to work. There was a knock on the door. Mrs. Jewell opened it. 2 men stepped in wearing masks and holding guns. "Give us all your money," they demanded. "All I have is a nickel," said Mrs. Jewell. "I have a dime," said Mauricia. "I have 13 cents, said Leslie. "I have 4 cents, said Damien. "What kind of bank is this?" asked one of the robbers. "It's not a bank, it's a school," said Todd. "Can't you read?" "No," said the robbers. "Neither can I," said Todd. "Do you mean we walked all the way up 30 flights of stairs for nothing?" asked the robber. "Don't you have anything valuable?" Todd's eyes lit up. "We sure do," he said. "We have knowledge." He grabbed Joy's workbook and gave it to the robbers. "Knowledge is so much more valuable than money." Thanks, kid, said one of the robbers. Maybe I'll give up being a criminal and become a scientist, said the other. They left the room without hurting anybody. Now I don't have a workbook, complained Joy. Mrs. Jules gave her a new one. Joy had to start all the way back at the beginning. Hey, Joy, what page are you on? Said Todd. Page 1, Joy sighed. I'm on page 8, laughed Todd triumphantly. Mrs. Jules heard him. She circled his name. Todd had 3 strikes against him. At 12 o'clock, he left the room to go home early on the kindergarten bus. But this time when he left, he was like a star baseball player leaving the field. All the children stood up, clapped their hands, and whistled. Todd just scratched his head. Chapter 6, BB. BB was a girl with short brown hair, little BB nose, totally tiny toes, and big brown eyes. Her full name was BB Gunn. She was the fastest drawer in Mrs. Jules' class. She could draw a cat in less than 45 seconds, a dog in less than 30, and a flower in less than 8 seconds. But, of course, BB never drew just one dog or one cat or one flower. Art was from 12:30 to 1:30. Why, in that time she could draw 50 cats, 100 flowers, 20 dogs, and several eggs or watermelons. It took her the same amount of time to draw a watermelon as an egg. Calvin sat next to BB. He didn't think he was very good at art. Why, it took him the whole period just to draw one airplane. So instead, he just helped BB. He was BB's assistant. As soon as BB would finish one masterpiece, Calvin would take it from her and set down a clean sheet of paper. Whenever her crayon ran low, Calvin was ready with a new crayon. That way, BB didn't have to waste any time, and in return, BB would draw 5 or 6 airplanes for Calvin. It was 12:30, time for art. BB was ready. On her desk was a sheet of yellow construction paper. In her hand was a green crayon. Calvin was ready. He held a stack of paper and a box of crayons. Ready, BB, said Calvin. Ready, Calvin, said BB. Okay, said Mrs. Jules, time for art. She had hardly finished her sentence when BB had already drawn a picture of a leaf. Calvin took it from her and put another piece of paper down. Red, called BB. Calvin handed BB a red crayon. Blue, called BB. He gave her a blue crayon. They were quite a pair. Their teamwork was remarkable. BB drew pictures as fast as Calvin could pick up the old paper and set down the new. A fish, an apple, 3 cherries, bing, bing, bing. At 1:30, Mrs. Jules announced, Okay, class, art is over. BB dropped her crayon and fell over on her desk. Calvin sighed and leaned back in his chair. He could hardly move. They had broken their old record. BB had drawn 378 pictures. They lay in a pile on Calvin's desk. Mrs. Jules walked by. Calvin, did you draw all these pictures? Calvin laughed. No, I can't draw. BB drew them all. Well, then what did you draw? Asked Mrs. Jules. I didn't draw anything, said Calvin. Why not? Don't you like art? Said Mrs. Jules. I love art, said Calvin, and that's why I didn't draw anything. Mrs. Jules did not understand. It would have taken me the whole period just to draw one picture, said Calvin, and BB would only have been able to draw 100 pictures. But with the 2 of us working together, she was able to draw 378 pictures. That's a lot more art. BB and Calvin shook hands. No, said Mrs. Jules, that isn't how you measure art. It isn't how many pictures you have, but how good the pictures are. Why, a person could spend his whole life just drawing one picture of a cat. In that time, I'm sure BB could draw 1,000,000 cats. 2 million, said BB. Mrs. Jules continued, but if that one picture is better than each of BB's 2 million, then that person has produced more art than BB. BB looked as if she were going to cry. She picked up all the pictures from Calvin's desk and threw them in the garbage. Then she ran from the room. I thought her pictures were good, said Calvin. He reached into the garbage pail and took out a crumpled up picture of an airplane. Bibi walked outside into the playground. Louis, the yard teacher, spotted her. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I'm going home to draw a picture of a cat," said Bibi. "Will you bring it to school and show it to me tomorrow?" Louis asked. "Tomorrow?" laughed Bibi. "By tomorrow, I doubt if I'll even be finished with one whisker." That's all that we're doing today, guys. Tune in next time for the next couple of chapters in the book Sideways Stories from Wayside School. Thanks for joining us. Bye.